All right, hello everyone, and welcome to the very last part of my answer guide or marking guide, or really just what I think the answer should be for the 2020 VCA economics exam. We're going to be looking at question 4 today, which is the very last part, where we start getting into some of the area study 1 stuff with the smallest supply demand question I've ever seen. But I think a few people got tripped up in a few areas here, so we're going to go through it in fairly a decent amount of detail, or as much detail as the video takes. We've got 4 questions to go through, and then we'll be done. And then if you've been following these, you'll probably be done with economics until you probably go study it at university, where it will get, actually, I think easier. Economics didn't make sense to me till I got to uni. Then when I got to uni, I was like, economics isn't that bad. So hopefully you've got it sooner than I did, because that will be good for you. So, explain the nature and conditions for a perfectly competitive market. So, there's only 3 marks. VCA study design only really points out 3 preconditions for a perfectly competitive market, but there are 4 that we tend to accept. So, hopefully, you were just going into a little bit of detail, and that there are many buyers and sellers, that there is no product differentiation. And if you wanted to be real smart, you would have written homogeneous products. And hopefully as well, you would have given an example. Examples are always good. You just said ease of entry and exit. And then finally, resource mobility. So resources are mobile. And hopefully with each of these points, you would have explained it in a little bit of detail. So you would have talked about with resource mobility, producers are able to shift their resource allocation into whatever is currently popular. Kind of lines up with the ease of entry and exit. Like competitors can come into the market very quickly if they wish to, but they can also exit with no real barriers to entry. No product differentiation, homogeneous products, therefore there is no brand differentiation. Many buyers and sellers, which means that sellers tend to be price takers and just have to accept whatever price consumers are giving to them. There was only 3 marks. I'm assuming that VCA wanted 3 with a little bit of detail about each, but who knows? Maybe they'll accept 2. Maybe they want all 4. I'm assuming 3 though. 3 makes sense. Nature of a perfectly competitive market, a situation where there are many buyers and sellers, no product differentiation, ease of entry and exit, and resource mobility. So that one hopefully wasn't that bad, because you would have really specifically gone through that in class. Part B though. Part B is a fairly difficult question in that there's a lot going on with it. So in a competitive market, explain how an increase in demand for a product might result in a change in relative price. Explain how this could influence resource allocation and living standards. So what I'm assuming they're asking here is they're asking for a situation that would cause demand to have a favorable shift to the right, and how that would then affect resource allocation and living standards. So I'd probably first talk about a favorable demand factor. So you could just go something easy like successful advertising as an example to talk about why that would happen. And then if we have supply on there as well, we're going to talk about how that might result in a change in relative prices. So this would be how you adjust to a new equilibrium point. So like when a favorable shift happens, there ends up being a shortage, which leads to consumers bidding up prices, which leads to an increase in selling price. That then means that that relative price has increased compared to similar products. That means that businesses will reallocate as it's relatively better relative profits. And then so reallocate their resources as they relatively more profitable. And then we get to the point on living standards. So how that's going to impact material and non-material living standards. Well, if prices are higher, that's going to be negative for material living standards. So that's obviously going to be a negative, higher prices. So you're going to have less disposable income, etc. I'd also say it would be good because more businesses reallocate resources towards that. It could create jobs and therefore more employment, better material living standards. Then you could also say with non-material living standards, well, you have more choice, so that could be good. So it could be more options. You could say, well, like people could have, if things are higher in price, they're going to be more stressed because they're going to have less income left over. So stress could be one. I'd probably actually lean towards the good ones now. So like saying that if more businesses are allocating their resources into producing whatever the product is, also try and give it a product. Like even if it's just fruit, just being like market for apples. I don't know why I'm telling you to do this now because you've already done the exam. If you did that, it's easy to compare it to other products. You say if it creates more jobs in that area, then people are going to be less stressed. But you can do either way for material and non-material as long as you justify it. So hopefully that would, doing all these things, there's a lot to it, would get you the 5 marks. It's a bit of a mess. Then one strength and one weakness of the use of the market to allocate resources. Well, your strength is going to be consumer sovereignty in that the market will produce what consumers demand, which therefore hopefully achieve efficiencies. So consumer sovereignty, and explain that in more detail. A negative would be the overproduction of socially undesirable or demerit goods. I'm going to go demerit here because it's shorter and easier to spell. But overproduction of demerit goods. So for example, the market allocates a lot of resources towards cigarette and alcohol and gambling production because it is profitable. So therefore, free market businesses are motivated by profit. They're going to produce whatever's being demanded that is going to profit, even if it negatively impacts living standards. So with either, both of these, you kind of got to talk about why consumer sovereignty is a good thing, why overproduction of demerit goods or underproduction of socially desirable goods is a bad thing. You could have many other ones. These are the ones I think are very easy to talk about. It's only described, so kind of talking about what it is and a little bit of how that impacts things, totally fine. And then the last question, using a fully labeled supply-demand diagram, explain how the Australian government could correct a market failure. So we're going to go with that fully labeled diagram first to start with. So you've got price, you've got quantity, you've got your demand line, your supply line. So let's think of a market failure. So what I would have gone in this, I would have gone like market for solar panels. Because then you can talk about subsidies. And you could go subsidies on consumption or production. I'm going to go for subsidies for production in this case. And so if we talk about subsidies in production, it's going to decrease the cost of production for businesses in producing solar panels and therefore create a favorable shift where this should help create a new equilibrium where a higher quantity is being supplied at a slightly lower price, therefore correcting a market failure because consumers are more likely to buy the renewable energy source rather than demanding coal or fossil fuels. So if you've drawn that full diagram and then correctly explained it, so I'm assuming based on this mark allocation, BCAR's probably gone 3 marks for the diagram and 3 marks for your explanation. And so you talk about subsidies. What are subsidies? So subsidies like a cash payment to businesses to incentivize them towards a certain form of production. Cash subsidies on solar panels or subsidies for businesses for solar panels helps bring down the cost of production and therefore incentivizes them to produce more solar panels. This increase of production, you probably define market failure too actually. So market failure is any situation where the allocation of resources does not maximize living standards. Therefore, to correct this market failure, the government uses subsidies, blah, 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 decrease the cost of production for businesses, producing solar panels. Therefore, they produce more solar panels, correcting this form of market failure as people are moving towards a more renewable form of energy and are going to do less damage to the environment, therefore correcting the market failure of externalities. So we're going to link that to externalities. And that's it. That's the exam done. Hopefully you went all right on it. Hopefully this was helpful to you in either telling you why you're right or if you weren't quite right, what you could have done. Either way, it's done now. You're going to get the score that you get. Universally in teacher communities that I've been talking to, people seem to think this is a fairly difficult exam. I thought it was fairly approachable, but if that's the general vibe, hopefully that means it's going to be a lower mark to get a high score. Who knows though, because there's a lot of, well, there's not a lot, it's a relatively small subject, but there are thousands of people who do this subject. And so if you feel pretty confident after watching these videos, you are probably in the higher end of those students and will hopefully get a great score. If you do get a great score by December when you find out, and these videos have helped you, let me know then. So I can brag about it to my colleagues and my higher ups so then I look good at my job. Other than that though, I hope this has been useful for you, this series where we've talked about the exam for over an hour. And good luck with whatever you do in the future. It's been great being able to help you this year and I wish you all the best. So have a wonderful day and I'll see you next time. But maybe I won't.